Hello and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin from the Modern Observer Group. And with me, as always, is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how you doing this week?
Doing good. How you doing, Eric?
I'm doing fantastic, although I'm surprised my house isn't in Oz after the storm that hit last night.
Yeah, I thought I was taking off from Kansas myself, but it was quite the night. And as I was joking with you guys this before we turned this thing on, I turned on my generator this morning 5 minutes before the power came back after being out from 9:30 last night till about quarter to 5 this morning. So somebody up there was waiting to laugh at me.
There you go. Well, yeah, fortunately, I only lost power momentarily, but I've got a part of my house just hanging off now that I've got to remove because the wind just got a hold of it and pulled.
There
It
you
was
go.
really something.
Whoa.
Powerful.
So today we've got our guest with us. We'd like to introduce David Fortt. David, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, I'm a husband, a father, within recent years, a grandfather. I've lived in New England most of my life, so I can identify with what you gentlemen are talking about. We love to talk about the weather in New England. I think it's a
Yes,
great,
we do.
I think it's a great opener. I mean, I don't know what some people in other parts of the country where the weather is extremely consistent. I don't know what they talk about. So, been in New England most of my life. Have solitary pursuits that I like to follow. I like to read a lot, but I also like competitive games, group games that are competitive. Can't do as much of that as we used to, obviously.
No, that's for sure. We've had lockdowns going on around the country. A lot of places are actually stepping back into more restrictive lockdowns. And let's just hope everybody is safe and that we're through this fairly quickly.
Absolutely, absolutely. On the business side of my life, I've always been involved in marketing, or I'll say the customer facing side of the organization. That's where I've been, that's where I've enjoyed being. I recall a number of decades ago seeing what I call the light in their eyes. I was in an exchange, a conversation with customers at the time, and I observed in that moment the light in their eyes. I just saw something change, and I realized that that I could observe that not only in their eyes, but I could also hear it in their voice. And so it became a defining moment for me in terms of the level of interaction and what I was striving for in making a connection with people.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about building relationships and making connections on this podcast. It's really so important because people don't do business with businesses, they do business with people. And that relationship becomes so important. So, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about what you do?
Well, we started New Image Associates in 2000, and it's been through several evolutions as happens in business. But basically, we built an expertise in helping small businesses solve three critical people problems, I'll call them. And I've labeled them, Eric, I've labeled them the three R's. Number one is recognizing the right talent for their organization. Number two is being able to retain that talent. And number three is to be able to what I call rejuice that talent. And I think probably the first two R's, recognize and retain, were familiar to you in one way or another, but rejuice is actually a word that I made up. And so maybe I'll explain it a little bit if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
Thank you. It really has to do with, and actually I'd like to go into all three of them a little bit, but the rejuice has to do with the internal and external reasons for rejuicing. Sometimes an employee needs rejuicing because of changes that have taken place in the organization. Those are obviously external changes. You've got new leadership, you've got a merger acquisition that takes place, and you've got now people that you have new leadership then, and people that have maybe different ideas than the previous owners. Sometimes it's internal. People go through stuff like now, right?
Yeah.
And COVID has brought a lot of changes to the workplace. So rejuicing is a critical element.
Yeah, and you do have a really neat approach to doing what you're doing. David's website is talentmatters.com. And on that website, as soon as you go in there, there is a video right there on the homepage. And the video is wonderful. It really is a good capsule of what you're doing. And it starts with your little phrase that you get leaders and teams to help work and play well together and share their toys in the sandbox. And then you go on to say that you're not the same as an executive recruiter because you want to make sure the talent brought in fits and you're hiring for skills and firing for attitude. And you talked a little bit about, modern day thing where with all the social media, the candidates can really prepare a lot just by going to websites and all that kind of stuff for interviews. And what you do is a little bit differently. So tell us a little bit about your process, which I know you took me through, which is very, very interesting.
Well, thank you, Chip. I appreciate that. And you're right. The website is Talent Matters CT, as in Connecticut.com. And to tell you a little bit more about the three R's, one of the things, the first R is recognizing the right talent. That begins actually inside the organization because, like you said, I'm not an executive recruiter. So a lot of times when people hear talent, recognizing the right talent, oh, you're going to help me find the person. So, well, I'm going to help you think about finding the right person first before a resume even comes in the door or comes in your email. And we have a process that we call If the Job Could Talk, What Would It Tell Us? And it's a question that kind of catches people. It kind of comes out of left field because we never think about the job having a voice of its own. But we're able to give voice to the job through the use of proprietary surveys that basically validate a snapshot, a picture of that job based on input from a selected internal group of people. And we then use that snapshot to attract the right candidate, the one that fits the picture. And the candidate is even compared to the snapshot before they're offered a job. So it just tends to squeeze out a lot of the what I call bias, and it's not bias in the sense of a lot of the bias that you hear ethnicity and racial bias, but it's bias in terms of how I think the job should be done or how you think it should be done. Or maybe how you've done it, Chip. You did this job in the past, and so now you know how it should be done. Well, maybe not. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But God didn't make two of you. There's only one of you. So that other person, the person we hire to do what you were doing, isn't going to do it exactly the same way you did it. So recognizing the right talent is really critical, and it's inside the organization we begin that. Does that make sense to you, Eric, and you, Chip?
It does. And actually, it's a very important fact for most business owners to realize, because generally when folks hire, if they're not using a system like you have, or something like what Modern Observer Group offers, they tend to hire people exactly like themselves. And what happens is then the organization gets overloaded with people of one type And the fact of the matter is, there are different jobs that require different types of people, and you're not filling them properly if you just hire folks like yourself.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Well, the second R, excuse me, is about retaining talent. Once you recognize the right talent, once you bring it on board, you really need to work to retain it, and particularly in this day and time. When I say this day and time, I'm comparing current generations that are in the workforce and coming into the workforce to prior generations like the baby boomers and definitely the traditionals, where they were more inclined to stay put. The generations and the newer generations coming into the workforce, whether you want to call them millennials or Xers, and there's all different labels that people use. They are much more mobile, and they're much more willing to take their talent and go down the street if you aren't working to retain their talent. And how that's done is by identifying and maximizing their key assets and helping them minimize their liabilities. Most retention studies that Gallup and other organizations have done show that the ability to grow in a job is a key factor as to why people stay in that job. So that second R is very important.
Yeah, there's definitely serious issues now retaining talent. Where once upon a time you entered a company right after graduation, you stayed, if not for your entire career, certainly most of it. Now, I was actually shown some statistics the other day where it used to be the average person would change their job every 3 years. Now, people are only lasting about a year and a half at a position. So,
well, you're absolutely right, Eric. One of the things pre-COVID, I was at a convention where a management consultant was talking to a whole group of executives and that were in a position to hire in this particular industry. And he posed the question: how many of you are looking to hire MBAs? And a bunch of hands went up. They were looking to hire MBAs. And he said, what's the one thing they want from your company? He said, we did a survey and we found that, some high percentage, like 60% of them want this one thing from your company. And one of the executives said, money. And he said, no, they didn't get it. And long story short, he said, the one thing that 60% of them want is a good reference to their next employer. You could have
people are just looking at a job as a stepping stone to the next job.
And that's exactly what this guy was saying. They're looking at you as a resume builder. He said by the time you come in there at month 16 to talk to them about, we see you're doing good work. He said they're halfway out the door. A bunch of them have already put their resume out there. They've got their next spot already lined up. So retaining talent is something that has to start really on day one, and we help with that as well through sometimes coaching of the individual and group coaching as well. But I want to touch on this rejuicing because I think it's so critical right now. I've got a lot of clients actually that are very interested in this because COVID has helped us lose our juice. I said it happens internally and externally, and what we've got going on in the workplace right now is a combination of both of internal and external factors that are squeezing us, and we've lost our juice. Many of us have lost our juice and are kind of struggling. I was part of a webinar recently, and I wish I could take credit for for what I'm about to share, but this fellow shared something that I thought was excellent. He said on these Zoom calls where people are teams or hybrid teams, and now you're on these Zoom calls. And he said we have 4 questions that what we call check-in questions that we ask participants to either reflect on or share on. So they don't have to necessarily share, but they do need to reflect on them. Number 1 is, what is my mental state coming into this call? Am I going to be able to be fully present mentally on this call? What is my emotional state? Is there something that's just happened recently that really that's going to impact my ability to participate, to be a full present participant? What's my relational state, not only with the people on the call but even outside of that? And what's my physical state? How am I feeling? Within my body, am I paying attention to what I'm feeling? And I felt that those questions, that was so. What do you think about those, Chip? What do you think about them?
I think those questions are wonderful. I mean, you mentioned going right into this, the word coaching, and that's one of the services that you list as far as doing it. And I love the word facilitator, because rather than being a consultant and going in saying you got to do this, and this, what you're doing when you're a facilitator and coaching people is getting the answer out of them just by kind of leading them along in the right direction. And that's a key thing, obviously, for the people that you are dealing with who hire you to get their people in the door and so on and so forth. They need to do the same thing with their employees, which to me is a big part of the reducing side of things. So, I mean, I think that mental state, emotional state, relational state, physical state, that's all a huge part of it. And what it is being interested in the person themselves as opposed to the talents that they bring and so on and so forth. And I mean, we all 3 of us met through networking. I mean, you and I think, met through the Metro Hartford Chamber of Commerce, maybe last century. I don't even know, but it's all about relationships. And relationships are something that you need to develop with your employees. And obviously, with your skills of coaching the people that you're working with into doing that, I'm sure that you're emphasizing that a lot.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, one of the things you said that I just want to put an and next to is that in coaching, there's a statement that we can bring wisdom to the conversation and to the process. Coaches do bring wisdom to it, but rather than looking to us for answers, we really are looking to pull answers and help people pull answers out of themselves. We think the answers are really within the person, and so many times that's proven itself over and over again. And those are the answers that resonate with them, and that they're able to really hold on to.
I'm sure one of the things that juices you the most is when your client gets that aha moment based upon you're leading them to that aha moment in the first place. Because once they develop that, it's fantastic.
You're right, and the rejuicing isn't just necessarily COVID related. It's really, and this is kind of the big umbrella and under which even COVID sits, and the label on that umbrella is change. Technology's changing. So many things are changing. I was reading how people in the San Francisco Bay Area, if you're trying to move from San Francisco Bay Area, and a lot of people have moved and are trying to move, not only because of COVID, they're trying to get to more rural places, but also because of the fires that have raged through California this past summer, and to some extent are still going on. People are looking to get somewhere where there isn't that danger. And they were talking about how if you wanted to rent a U-Haul truck going from San Francisco Bay Area to, say, Texas, where a lot of folks have been headed, you're looking at about $2,500 rental. But if you were going the other way, from Phoenix, Arizona to San Francisco, it's about $400. And that's
your supply and demand.
Exactly. The U-Haul guy in San Francisco is sitting there saying, I need more trucks. I don't have enough trucks.
Yep.
In fact, I'm going to have to go out and get some of them and drive them back, and that's costing me money. So I gotta have people front load that expense for me. So there's just, and you guys have read some of the same articles about how folks are coming to this beautiful New England area, all different parts, not just Connecticut, but also Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, looking for a little plot of ground that's just a little bit bigger than what they had in a major city or metropolitan area. So there's a lot of change. That creates hybrid teams, and that creates issues for leadership in terms of how do we manage these people that are remote, and how do we really stay in touch with them. There's a big thing that we're also focused on, and that's workplace stress. How do you measure it effectively? How do you measure it effectively in individuals? How do you measure it effectively in leaders? And how do you measure it effectively in tools? And we have an instrument that's not clinical. It's not going to say, David is the next axe murderer that is going to manifest itself. It's not that kind of a clinical instrument. Rather, it's a diagnostic tool that's going to enable David to ask questions about, because it measures 17 different measurements. Like one, for example, that's really huge right now is loss of autonomy and a sense of loss of control. And so if as a leader, I can provide that sense of autonomy and a sense of control, make sure people have that in their workspace to an effective degree, then that's really going to help them manage their stress levels. So it's a different picture.
These days when the new normal is working remotely, you got to have that.
Yeah, I don't think that's ever going to go away. Do you?
No, not at all. I'm sure that you're trying to basically regrouping a little bit as far as the way you're approaching things, because that's what you're going to be dealing with from now on. There'll still be some offices open with lots of people, but more and more, and this is the reason why people are coming to New England and West Hartford and all these areas around here, is because they know they're going to be working out of their homes moving ahead. So rather than paying twice as much to live in New York City and be miserable in a third of the space, they're coming up here. And we're at our West Hartford chamber meetings every week, having the realtors talk about putting a house on the market, and within a few hours there's 20 or 30 offers for 5 figures over asking. That's just the way
exactly
we're moving. So obviously you're helping people to cope with, on the managerial side of things, that you're going to have your employees working out of their homes now, but you still have to keep them productive. And then the people working out of their homes, obviously some are going to take to it easily. Other people are going to need to really get themselves organized, and they're going to have to go through a program to do that. So it's got to be very interesting times for you as far as the way you approach things too.
It's interesting and it's challenging because, I've even had people, I've said to people, well, it's great news that we have, several companies now that are, their vaccines are in the pipeline. So there's testing going on, and there, I don't know if we can say we can see the light at the end of the tunnel quite yet, but we know that we're going to be able to see a light at the end of the tunnel. But I've had people say to me, well, I'm not sure I'm going to take the vaccine. Or I'm not going to take it right away. I don't know if I trust the vaccine. And so what we're facing, really, what that brought home to me afresh, is that we are emotional creatures. And I think Dale Carnegie said that we are really more emotional than we are logical. We like to think that we're these great rational beings, but a lot of neurological studies are showing that we actually make decisions emotionally and then set about through confirmation bias,
Yes.
selecting the information that supports the emotional conclusion that I had in the first place. So we're complex. You're right. I know we won't solve that one on this call. I don't know if there's any solving it, actually.
Now, you also have to remember that this has been going on even before COVID. I mean, right now, I've spoken to people for years, and the trends are that by the year 2050, the largest corporations in the world will only have about 1,500 employees, and everybody else is going to be a consultant going from project to project, business to business. So
Right.
we've been changing into this for quite a while. COVID just stepped on the accelerator.
Yeah, it mashed the motor in a big way, didn't it? Yeah, it certainly did. It certainly did. Well, if I could just sum up what we're about at New Image Associates, it really is about people first. As human beings, we have this powerful ability to communicate and collaborate around complex concepts. I haven't seen the lions and the tigers really getting together. I know that some animals hunt in packs, wolves and others hunt in packs. But if they could ever collaborate the way we do, we'd probably be in trouble. We'd probably stay out of the woods more than we do now. But we're able to collaborate around complex concepts. So even though we have our challenges, within the challenge, there's incredible opportunity for change and for growth for individuals, for teams, and for companies, and for cultures as well, and countries. So that's what gets me out of bed in the morning, quite honestly.
Fantastic. Right, we're coming up on the end of our time. So if somebody wants to get more information on your company, get a hold of you, how can they do so?
Well, I'd recommend that they go to the website, www.talentmattersct.com. Send me an email at david@talentmattersct.com. Say, I heard you on the podcast, and I'd love to talk to you about X, Y, or Z. Can you reach out to me? We have some complimentary things that we extend, surveys and so forth that we extend in many situations that'll give people an opportunity to have what I call a taste of the ice cream. When you walk into an ice cream shop and you see a new flavor, they don't try to sell it to you. They just hand you that little spoon, the little plastic spoon, and actually your taste buds sell it to you, or not. And I operate the same way. Hand people that little plastic spoon with a little bit of the ice cream on it, and their taste buds tell them what I could never tell them. Okay, so that's what I would recommend. Thank you, Eric. Thank you.
All right. Chip, what do you think is the big takeaway for our listeners this week?
I love the people first philosophy, and in listening to David, what we're concentrating on here is just bringing in people that make the right fit. And that's the prep work and the screening and getting people in the door in the first place. And then the 3 R's that you have, recognizing to get them in the first place, and then retaining them, and the rejuicing. It's a fabulous strategy. It's very simple and easy to understand. And as David said, I would go to talentmattersct.com and first look at that video. It's only 3 minutes long, and it kind of explains everything. And it really gives you a good flavor to what David's all about, which I'm sure you can sense by listening to him here too. But go there. There's a whole lot of information there. And Dave says take advantage of his offer. Contact him.
Absolutely. I think for me, the big takeaway is fitting the right people to the right opportunities. That's so important. People are not interchangeable. You have to make sure the right person's getting into the right position. That's how you get the best work. That's how they stay engaged. And that's how you retain employees, by keeping them engaged, excited about their work, and making sure it's a good fit. You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch us every week at xvadio.com/podcasts. You can also find us on the Apple Podcasts app, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever, and make next week even better. We'll see you then.